We are talking with Matthew West. Thank you so much, Matthew, for taking a few minutes to chat with us at FaithWire and CBN News. You've got a brand new Christmas album, and you're one of the artists, one of the Christian artists. So whenever I think of Christmas, I think of your music,
Oh, wow.
because you have put out some great Christmas music over the years. So I was excited when you had a new album. Why did you decide to do a new one in 2021?
Well, first of all, thanks for the kind words. I've always loved Christmas music and have always loved the challenge of not only re recording my favorite classics, but as a songwriter, I love the challenge of kind of writing what maybe could be the classics of tomorrow, too. You know what I mean? Which is really hard to
Yeah.
do. But I think in Christian music, as a songwriter, I feel like a storyteller. And in Christian music, we get the great honor of telling the greatest story ever told through the songs that we write. And so there really is just like a natural fit for, a guy like me. I use my platform to tell people about Jesus. So to make a Christmas album, to really celebrate Luke chapter 2 and the greatest story ever told, the greatest gift ever given. As far as why I decided to make a Christmas album this year, let's say I had plenty of time on my hands. No, we had lots of shows canceled, but the real reason was the title of the album, We Need Christmas. I've just felt like that these last 2 years, like the whole world is just crawling towards December,
Yeah.
and it's just been a real season of all the things that Christmas reminds us of are things that have seemingly been in short supply. I mean, all over the news right now, we're hearing about supply chain shortages, right? And when I look around the world from a spiritual standpoint, sometimes you're like, man, hope is in short supply, peace is in short supply, love and joy. And when I think about December, what I love about Christmas is we're reminded that there is no, I know this might sound cheesy, but there's no supply chain shortage when it comes to the things that God offers us. And Christmas can remind us of that. So I felt it was time to make a Christmas album, and I wanted to call it We Need Christmas because, quite honestly, the West family does.
Yeah, absolutely. I do agree with you. There are so many people who are just constantly looking for something to be happy about, something to get excited about, something that feels normal too, right? Like people have lived these lives that are so removed from what we've known in the past. Um, I want to ask, what do you think about, and this might be a little bit too deep, I don't know, because I might be reading into it too much, but I think a lot of people are desperate for that hope, and sometimes I think they're getting it, but other times I think people are missing the point for the hope. So how have you communicated that and tried to reach people and say, yeah, this is an exciting time, but like you said, there's a reason it's exciting, and that's because of Jesus. How do you communicate that?
It's interesting. On my podcast yesterday, I had a guest who was a former Olympic gold medalist figure skater, and his name's Scott Hamilton. He's one of the greatest figure skaters in American history. Um, but he said something that really struck me, and he was talking about a particular part of figure skating, this certain move that required a great amount of discipline, and he hated it. But he knew that if he was ever going to go to the Olympics, let alone win a gold, that he was going to have to change his mind about that move and that
Mm,
event. And the way he said it though is he's like, I needed to change my relationship with the very thing that scared me. And I just thought that was so interesting. Like, I feel like it's come to a point for us where we got to change our relationship with with 2020 and 2021. And what I'm talking about, of course, is the power of a renewed perspective. And I believe it's a power of a renewed perspective that only can come from who we know is the real author of our stories. When we know who's writing the story of our lives, then we can have a changed relationship with the things that scare us, with the things that stress us out, with the things that worry us, with the things that are behind us that we wonder what good could possibly come from that. And we talk about Christmas. They used to say, what good could possibly come from Nazareth, right? And I think about like this reminder of like we look back on 2020 and 2021 And I feel like the Lord's been helping me to like change my relationship with what's behind me and have it change my perspective as I move forward. I've seen so many people going through so many hard times, losing loved ones. Right now, we meet every week for prayer, and we go live on Instagram and Facebook, and thousands of prayer requests come in every single Wednesday, and we just spend time
Mm.
praying with people. And I think about my friend Rob, who's in hospice care battling brain cancer. He's got 7 kids and he's 49 years old. I think about my friend J.O. here in Nashville, who just lost his battle with COVID and left behind 2 daughters, 47 years old. I mean, these stories, one by one, they come into our website, they come into our ministry, and the reality is so many people are hurting in such a big way. And we've tried to make sure that people feel community with my music, that we can continue to hopefully help encourage them as we all look to Jesus and say, Lord, help us to change our relationship with the circumstances around us, and help us to remember that changing our relationship with what's around us starts by focusing on our relationship with the giver of all good things. And so,
Mm.
I don't know, those are just some things that have been on my heart lately, and what I hope to kind of encourage people with these days, because I know a lot of people going through a tough time.
Yeah. So that I wanted to ask you too about how you landed on creating this brand, which has really just been, you're so open and you just kind of live your life. Like you know, you talk so positively, you try to point people to hope. And I think there's such a lack of that in today's culture. So many people who have a platform are using it to divide more and more. Like it seems like social media is calling us to be as divisive as you can. That seems to be the siren call of our generation. So how have you, you know, how did you come about deciding to be different, to go against the grain in that way? And how have you stuck by that? Because I imagine there are times when you probably do get frustrated and you want to say something, but you check yourself and you haven't.
Well, it's interesting because even if you're not trying to be divisive, the world is so sensitive right now that people will interpret anything you're doing as being divisive too. So it's, in some ways, I mean, if we haven't learned this by now, as Christ followers, it's in some ways on this earth, it's a no-win situation. Do you know what I mean? Like, um, we are not going to be loved for our beliefs, and yet can we love others despite the difference of their beliefs? And I mean, I did not escape 2021's cancel culture unscathed. And I mean, in the summertime, I put out a song called "Modest is Hottest," and it was a song that I wrote as a from the perspective of like this overprotective dad of daughters who wants to like, who I'm jokingly trying to convince them that the hottest trend right now is turtlenecks and slacks.
Yeah.
And I thought it was funny, and my family thought it was hilarious, and we made a funny music video, and we put it out on Father's Day, and it was just this like just a lighthearted good values kind of thing. But man, oh man, I mean, I didn't realize the word modest. I should have realized this, but sometimes you step in things, you're not even trying to be divisive, but all of a sudden people have decided for you what
Mm.
you meant and what your intention was. And that turned into a real storm for me, where it was like people were getting very ugly. And then I was like felt pressure to pull the video down, and then Christians came after me saying, "Well, you're just a coward." And it wasn't even intended to be a political statement. It wasn't anything. It was just when they started to turn it into something it wasn't, I had to step in as a dad and try to
Mm.
protect my daughters. And so I think, what I've learned, and the only reason I bring that story up is because these days I'm just realizing, like, man, I really like you and I like talking to you, but you're not my audience. And anybody listening to this, I really like them, and I hope what I share with them encourages them. But now more than ever, I realize I have an audience of exactly one.
Yeah.
And if I can move forward daily, going, God, whatever I do today, I don't want to take a step without you leading it. I don't want to speak a word without you breathing it into me. I want to be in the center of your will for my life, and I want to be God honoring. And then let the chips fall where they may, because that's my chief goal in life. I don't always hit that mark. Nobody does. But at the end of the day, I want that to be like the most recurring heartbeat within me.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's so true. And the further we go into cancel culture, the more divisive our society gets, the more necessary it is to remember as a believer that your only true audience, the only one that matters, is Christ. And if you're pursuing Christ, then you're going to be representing Him on the earth well, right? Because He's going to make you more like Himself the more you pursue Him.
Imagine
Um,
that, right? I think
right.
sometimes don't we forget that though? And
Mm,
I'll be honest. I mean, you talked about me being honest. Like, you can't put a song out called "Truth Be Told" and then like not think about the meaning of that every single day when you sing it. Like, and the reality is for a long time, like, and I can be as guilty as anybody. And I'm sure there's a lot of other leaders in the faith world that they're so busy doing ministry and working that they forget that God's saying, "Hey, let me keep working on you." Right? It's almost like, a personal trainer, like some physical trainer gets in good shape, but then spends all their time training other people, and all of a sudden he drops down and can't even do 10 push-ups. And I think for me, sometimes that's the category I have fallen into, where I'm
mm,
so good at encouraging other people to dive into their faith and to go deeper and to keep looking to God and letting them change. But like, am I doing that in my own life? And
yeah.
and so that's where I think if there's an honesty that comes through in me, hopefully it's from the perspective of me just being highly aware of my propensity for like talking a good game and
Mm.
not always living a good game.
Yeah, and, whether it's songs like Truth Be Told or, whatever, are there moments when you, are on the stage, you're singing the song, or you're on, Instagram or Facebook Live, you're singing a song, and you're thinking, "Man, today, I don't know if I believe this. Like, God, help me to believe this." Like, how do you walk through that spiritual battle when you're, like you said, also at the same time encouraging people and trying to point them to Christ?
I would say what I feel more often is my belief is not shaken. I know that I know that I know that God is who He says He is. He does what He says He will do. I've seen His faithfulness over and over again in my life, in my story, in the life of my family, and in the world around me. I know what I believe, and that's a firm foundation. But I think a lot of times what I wrestle with when I'm on stage is just going like, do I live what I believe? And
Mm,
so a lot of times my songs are my conscience. Like, sometimes I'm like on stage and I'm going like, I got a song called "Do Something," right? And it's all about like, hey, God's called us not to wait around for somebody else to change the world. He's created you to do something. And man, you want to talk about a song that like hits me in the gut when I'm on stage singing it. You might see me doubled over it like I was in a UFC fight because I get punched in the gut going, did I do something today like that was I about a cause greater than me today, or was I only focused on what I wanted to eat and what I wanted to do and where I wanted to go and how comfortable I could be? And so I think that's my internal wrestling match when I'm on stage. But ultimately, I think that's why I write so many songs about God's grace, because
mm,
I think those songs when I'm on stage, I'll be up there singing about God's grace, and I'm like, thank you, Lord. Thank you. Thank you that you don't give up on me. Thank you that this song is for me too. You know,
mm.
and I love that. I think about, like, remember back in the last few years, there's been that huge like Me Too movement, and I think it's interesting because I feel like there's power in Me Too. There's power in togetherness of, hey, none of us are the only one. You know
Right.
what I mean? You're not the only one who's messed up in that way. You're not the only one who's got this broken chapter of your story. And I hope my songs kind of wrap their arms around people and say, "Hey, guess what? Me too." Like, I'm not singing to you saying, "Come to me, I've figured it all out." I'm singing to you saying, "Hey, guess what? Me too. I feel like a failure sometimes too. But let me tell you about a God who keeps promising me that He keeps pursuing me. And that's what changes my life every single day."
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. That's so good. And I do think that um we forget that God is so graceful toward us and loves us so much. He's like, oh man, I don't care how many times you mess up. My door's always open. My arms are always open. And I think that's so counterintuitive to us,
Yeah.
particularly in what you mentioned earlier, this cancel culture where we want to assume the worst about people. We make the worst assumptions. Their motives have to be negative. As a Christian, what advice would you give to people who are wanting to check that and say, "Hey, I know this culture is telling me, let me assume the worst out of Matthew West." How do we not do that? Even if maybe they're deserving, even if somebody did do something wrong, how do we say, "Hey, man, let's hold them accountable, but let's not be the judge, jury, and executioner here."
Well, wouldn't it make sense that our human nature is to focus on the worst in other people when we tend to do that ourselves when we look in the mirror?
Mm,
Like, I mean, if we're being honest, what do I focus the most on in my life? It's my shortcomings. Like I'm not during the pandemic I dug in a little bit and tried to learn, like I always like swore off the Enneagram and stuff like that, but I started to kind of like go, well, I do want to like grow as an individual, and if that's a tool that can help me or whatever. But one of the things I noticed about my number, somebody said that the people who have the number I have a hard time waiting for the confetti to fall. They don't celebrate well. They focus way more on their failures than their successes. And that moment when I heard that, it like I felt shame wash over me because I thought about like what am I chasing, like why do I never feel like enough? Like why am I always focusing on what I don't do right? Or do you know what I
mm,
mean?
yeah,
And so I think for a world that doesn't know Jesus, man, like when you don't know Jesus and you've never come into contact with the one who sees the worst in you but believes the best and loves you anyways, like that should be a life-changing encounter. And it is a life-changing encounter when you see somebody and you meet somebody who loves you for exactly who you are. But as my friend Max Lucado always says, God loves you just the way you are, but he refuses to let you stay that way.
mm,
Like that to me, that's the life-changing encounter. So we shouldn't be surprised when a lost and hurting world that doesn't know Jesus is probably seeing the worst in themselves day in day out and then looking for the worst in other people, because what does that do? For a moment it makes you feel just a little bit better about yourself, but that's a
yeah,
momentary relief from the shame that we feel. And I think deep down what's happening is a lost and hurting world, they're looking for relief from darkness, relief from shame, relief from guilt of their own mistakes, and it helps them for a moment just to point out everybody else's flaws. And man, that's a self righteousness that can only be helped by a God who says if we'll humble ourselves and call on his name, that he will heal our land. And so, as Christians, man, I'm just trying to encourage others and I'm trying to live this out to just to believe, man, I know there's a God who sees the worst in me, but he loves me anyway. And I believe he's calling me to do that with other people and not try to put them down so that I can make myself feel better about my shortcomings.
yeah, and isn't that so true? I mean, that's regardless of what sin you're going through, or you're tempted by, and I'm saying this to myself too, it's that momentary satisfaction is so much more appealing because like,
Oh,
I'll be happy right now if I judge that other person or if
yeah.
I indulge in whatever it is.
Yes.
Whereas as Christians, we have to remember we're in it for the long haul, right? Christ is going to make us better over time, and it's
Well,
a commitment.
well, you think about what's the prayer in the Bible? Thank you, God, that I am not like other men, right? Like
Yeah.
that's that self-righteous prayer that just shields our own woundedness. Like I'm like,
Mm,
and I've done that. I mean, we don't always verbalize that prayer, but we act that prayer out in the
yeah.
way that we judge other people's mistakes. Like, have you ever like kind of weirdly enjoyed hearing about someone's failure? Like, and,
Mm,
and maybe enjoy is not the right word, but you indulge in talking about it. And it's
yeah.
like, well, why is it? Why is that? Because you want to believe that you're not capable of the same mistake. I mean, the minute you say that would never happen to me, you know what I
Right.
mean? Like that's the thing that I try to keep in mind in my life, you know. And I don't know. I just in my life too, I think a lot about. I had somebody say, I heard somebody say that they made a list. I don't know if it was every day or every week, but they made a list of the people in their life that they would let down if they didn't follow Jesus and were left to their own devices. And like I always thought that was really powerful, like to have front and center like my wife, my daughters. Like when we forget that people are looking to us, like that's when we can lose sight of like what's at stake,
Yeah.
how we live our lives and how we love others. So,
Well, and, and I've heard over the years with different people, they're saying they get angry at you and maybe they're combative with you because you're a believer. But you know that if you slipped up, if you abandoned that faith that they so often attack you for, they'd be disappointed.
oh
uh,
yeah,
because they're attacking you because a lot of times they're seeking the same peace that you have and they just don't know where to find it. So
yeah,
just keep making yourself available to them, because one of these days it might not be you that has the conversation with them, but you've planted a seed and they might have a conversation down the road with somebody else.
yeah, absolutely.
um
Well, and
so
that's the irony is peace doesn't come with perfection, because
mm,
if it did, none of us would have it.
yeah,
And that's why,
yeah,
that's why the description of peace in the Bible is a peace that passes understanding. Well, what kind of peace passes understanding? A peace in knowing, guess what? I'm kind of messed up, but like God has paid the price for my sins. That's a
mm,
peace that passes understanding. And the world associates the peace that a Christian has with lumping this expectation on a Christian to be perfect. And Christians are, Christians at their best are willing to acknowledge their worst. And
yep,
so, you know what I mean? And so I think that's the hard part too, is when a non-believer like is secretly they're cheering when a Christian fails or whatever, and it's like, man, you're not going to find peace in that. The peace comes that passes understanding in acknowledging the worst in us and knowing that we're still loved.
yeah, for sure. Well, I want to wrap up the conversation. I want to talk a little bit more about your Christmas album, the We Need Christmas. So tell me a little bit about how you selected the songs. What was your favorite song to record on the album?
Well, I'm first of all, and you and I were talking before we started this interview. We have, I think we're brothers from another mother, because we're pretty big Christmas. We just love the Christmas season,
Yes,
right?
yeah,
You're with me. I don't see any Christmas decorations in your backdrop.
I
I'm in my
know.
studio, so I don't have any yet. But the West family, my wife and I have two daughters, and we just love the Christmas season. And so, what I did with this album was I wrote some new songs, but I also recorded some classics. One of my favorite classics is "I'll Be Home for Christmas," because I've logged a lot of miles on tour,
Yeah.
and but that song took on a new meaning over the last couple years with all my shows canceled. So you're gonna hear this sort of mixture of the classics and then some new songs that I've written. And I hope what I love is when I can put on a Christmas album and it's just playing in the kitchen while the family's making cookies, and it just becomes part of somebody's soundtrack. I will have to warn the people though that there's a Thanksgiving song on a Christmas album, and I think I just heard the needle scratch on the vinyl player. But I wrote this song last year called "Gobble Gobble" for Thanksgiving, because I was sitting around one day going, "How come there's all these Christmas songs, but there's never a Thanksgiving song? Who would do that?" Well, I issued myself the challenge and I accepted the challenge. So we wrote this goofy song called "Gobble Gobble," and you'll get to hear that on the Christmas album as well. Strangely, that one's been downloaded more than any other song. But it's just been a fun way to stay. I love putting out music. I love putting out a lot of music. I love writing a lot of songs. This year, I've actually got two songs that are going to be on the radio at Christmas time. One from my album, "We Need Christmas," and then one that I wrote with my friend Ann Wilson, who's a Christmas or a
Mm,
Christian artist. A song we wrote called "I Still Believe in Christmas." So I just, whether it's for my record or somebody else, I just love writing songs, and it's Christmas time, and the West
yeah.
family is ready. We're doing a Christmas tour. We're doing 8 special Christmas concerts throughout the country, but we're also going to be announcing a special Christmas virtual concert, because we have a lot of international listeners and fans and people who can't come to the shows themselves. And so the week of Christmas, we're going to have a special We Need Christmas virtual experience. And people from all around the world get to tune in at the same time. They get to chat in the message board. It's a really cool experience. So it's going to be a lot of fun this Christmas season. I'm super excited.
Yeah, that's awesome, and it seems like we're maybe kind of moving into this phase where we can have a bit of the best of both worlds, right? We can go you can be back in the on the stage with people, but also offering those opportunities for virtual concerts for people who
Oh,
are, like you said, international or uncomfortable or immunocompromised, whatever the reason
yeah.
is, and
Yeah.
can't come, they can still be part of all the Christmas celebration.
It's awesome. It really is the best of both worlds. And for me, like Christmas time is like I kind of like find my inner Michael Bublé. So I kind of joke as like Matthew Bublé, but like I put a tux on for the cover of the record, and like
Yeah.
we're gonna make that virtual concert a very special. It's almost like a TV show. Like we add little skits and stuff in, and you know, I think I'm funny. I don't know. My wife doesn't think I'm funny, but so I come up with these ideas for little sketches and stuff that people seem to enjoy. So a lot of good stuff coming this December, and I'm just thankful that people are letting my music be part of their Christmas soundtrack. You know?
Yeah, and, I have to mention that you brought up "Gobble Gobble." I think you and, Ben Rector,
Yes.
also came out with a Thanksgiving theme song. The 2
Yes.
of you are the only people I know who have Thanksgiving theme songs, so and I think it was John Acuff who joked a couple weeks ago on his social media. He said, "Well, people get upset when you're playing Christmas music too early." He says, "Well, send me your Thanksgiving songs, I'll put them in a playlist."
I
So add "Gobble Gobble" there.
told him. I know. Have you ever had him on your show? Have you ever interviewed him?
I No, I haven't interviewed him
You
before,
need to get
so
John. He came over to my studio and was a guest on my podcast, and it's going to air I think in December.
mhm.
But that dude was
He's
so
hilarious.
inspiring and so funny, man. I
Yeah.
loved talking to him. That's been a cool thing about doing my own podcast. Like, don't get me wrong, I enjoy talking about me, but I kind of get tired of me. So I get to do what you do on my show, where I get to ask questions and learn more from people who really inspire me, which is really cool. But he's a guy you should definitely talk to. He's awesome.
Yeah, for sure. Well, thank you so much, Matthew. I appreciate you taking a few minutes to talk with us at CBN and Faithwire. It means a lot. Congratulations on the new album. I'm looking
I
forward
appreciate
to playing it on repeat these
it.
next couple months.
Yeah, Merry Christmas. Thanks for having me. And anytime, look forward to doing this again.